Welcome back everybody, my name is Nick930 and this is my review for the cooperative action-adventure game A Way Out. A Way Out is a game designed specifically for two-player cooperative play, and because of that, it is impossible to play this game alone. You can either hook up two controllers and play it split screen, or invite your online friend to join. While most games would have you and your friend buying two copies of the game to play online together, A Way Out is designed so that only one player needs to buy a copy of the game. The other player has to simply download a free guest copy of the game that only requires a host player in order to play. So let's start this review off by talking about the game's story. A Way Out is a game about two prison inmates that work together to break out and take revenge on a common enemy. It's a very narrative-driven experience with some great character development sprinkled throughout. The game is very linear, and despite claims that the game will play differently every time, this simply isn't the case. Sure, you can pick from one or two paths at a few select points, but the end result is always the same and brings the story back on track. I think the characters were interesting, but the overall performances weren't the best I've seen, and some awkward animations didn't help make some of the scenes convincing. There's not much I can say about the story without spoiling it, but I can say that the game seems to be heavily inspired by famous prison break films like Shawshank Redemption. Now, since this is such a heavily narrative-driven experience, the game's gameplay is rather simplistic. Most of the game's mechanics revolve around QuickTime events and various button prompts to interact with a linear world. I did appreciate the amount of interaction each area offered, allowing the players to goof around in between important story segues, but I wouldn't expect a hardcore shooter experience or anything along those lines. I'd say the game more resembles something like Telltale's The Walking Dead, where you can move around some set areas, interact with various objects and people, and then during heavily scripted action sequences, complete a series of QuickTime events. That's not to say that the QuickTime events are bad. Unlike most poorly done QuickTime events, these button prompts seem to be consistent and at least make sense. If I were to replay this game, for example, I might even be able to play without the prompts at all. For example, X on the Xbox controller will always punch, and Y will always counter. And while the game may heavily rely on QuickTime events, it also has a very strong emphasis on its standout feature, the split-screen co-op. Even if you're playing online with a friend, the game is still set in split screen, which is probably the game's biggest selling point. You'll need to focus on both scenes at once to complete some of the more complex segments, like needing to sneak past certain guards, or having one player distract a guard while the other breaks a hole in the wall. It works surprisingly well, and the scenes where it transitions back to a single screen are seamless and well designed. When it comes to visuals, A Way Out doesn't necessarily impress. It's passable, but character animations, models, textures, and even some of the shaders and reflective surfaces are pretty outdated. But when you consider that the game was designed by a small indie studio that brought us The Tale of Two Brothers, it's still an impressive feat nonetheless. As a cooperative experience, A Way Out is totally worth it, and oddly enough, they didn't slap a $60 price tag on it either. You can pick this game up for only $30, and if you want to play with a friend online, only one of you needs to fork over the $30. The game's story is well done, and the mechanics, while simplistic, will be enjoyable as you and your friend work on clever ways to escape prison and beyond. I hope this review is helpful, and if you have any questions, feel free to post them below. If you want to see more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel for more content posted every week.